Have you ever dreamed of taking a motorcycle adventure but you weren't sure where to go? Or just as important, what's the best route to get from point A to point B? In this video, I'm going to share some tips and tricks with you guys so you can plan the best motorcycle ride ever. Stay tuned. What's up everyone, I'm Tim and this is my channel 40 Times Around. Today we're hanging out in my office and we're going to take a little time to talk about how I plan a route for a motorcycle trip, how I pick destinations, and how I find the best route to get from point A to point B. Now there's this certain appeal when you're traveling on a motorcycle to just hit the road with no plan and just pick a direction and roam freely and wildly across the great wide open. And that's an awesome idea if you have unlimited time. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. So this video is more geared towards if you have a certain amount of time off from work, how can you maximize that time, see and do all the things you want to do on a motorcycle, and be able to relax and enjoy the trip and be safe on the road and not be wasting time, on the side of the road deciding which way to go or what you want to see next. I also get a lot of excitement out of planning and preparing for a trip and studying maps and thinking about places I want to go and see and what's the best way to get there. That's all part of the fun for me. So it's like getting to start your trip earlier before you ever actually leave. So let's start with some destinations and how you can find awesome motorcycle destinations. The number one thing I look at in this country in particular, in the United States, is our national park system is amazing. I have never been to a national park that wasn't incredible and didn't have perfect motorcycling roads. So I always try to plan those into my trips, or usually just plan my trips around national parks that I want to go see. So if you're looking at possible destinations, I would start with this as a big main event for your motorcycle trips. Hit as many national parks as you can. You definitely won't regret it. So when I'm looking at a map, one other thing I'll look for besides national parks is sources of water. That could be a lake or a river or just the ocean, just coastline in general. Just tends to add a little bit to the scenery, and there's usually more activities you can do around water, whether it's swimming or fishing, camping near a lake, things like that. I like being around water, so I plan a lot of trips that kind of lead me towards lakes, rivers, things like that. Love taking a road that follows a river in particular. That is just such a great formula for an awesome motorcycle road. Now, depending on what you want to see and do on your trip, there's also historical landmarks that are usually pretty easy to find on a map. Also museums, things like that. There's a lot of cities with great culture in the United States and all over the world, really. So those are definitely things you could work into your route as well. I tend to avoid cities as much as possible, particularly because of the traffic and just the driving conditions in a city are a little treacherous. But there is a lot to be said for, experiencing a new city or museum, historical landmarks, places of historical value, things like that. So it's definitely worth mentioning. Now, another tool that I use to find some really unique and sometimes bizarre places is this website online called roadtrippers.com. And the reason I use this site is because I can put my route in and then pick and choose what I want to see along my route. And it'll tell me, within 30 miles, there are these certain categories that I can pick and choose. So I can do campsites or hotels, things like that. But what I mostly use this for actually is offbeat attractions. I've found some really cool and really bizarre, very interesting places like Salvation Mountain or the Corn Palace or the Spam Factory. Just really offbeat things that you weren't kind of expecting or wouldn't have otherwise known were there. So I use that a lot, and it's definitely a great way to kind of spice your trip up if you're looking for something different and interesting to see. Alright, now the really important stuff. How to find the best route to get from point A to point B. This is what really defines your motorcycle trip. It's not about destinations, it's about how you get around and finding the most beautiful and interesting ways to get from A to B. So one resource I use that isn't online, and I actually bring on a lot of trips with me, is a Michelin Map Book. Now, you can go with any map book for a road trip, but the reason I like Michelin so much is their scenic routes tend to be just absolutely amazing and kind of obscure too. They're not the obvious scenic routes you would think of. I mean, those are in there too, but I found a lot of roads that weren't necessarily called scenic bypasses using Michelin maps. Okay, so as you can see, this is my Michelin Map Book, and it's pretty beaten up. It's been around for a few years, and I've taken this on quite a few trips with me across the country and just all over the place. I absolutely love these map books. I'll actually link to this in the comments below. One thing I always do too is I'll actually just rip pages out and just put them right in my tank bag. And that way I can see it when I'm sitting on the bike. It's really convenient, and you know, I don't mind just pulling pages out and just sticking them in there if I know I'm going to, say, California for the weekend. So another resource when planning a route is obviously Google Maps. I use this a lot for just big overview, you know, try to get mileage for the total trip, things like that. It's not great for finding specific routes, but it is good for getting a bigger picture of your trip. All right, now let's get into a few tips on what specifically you can look for when you're looking at a map or Google Maps or anything like that. What you can look for to find the best motorcycle routes. Now, we all know that this isn't always about getting from point A to point B as fast as possible. More likely, if you're on a motorcycle, you're looking for the more scenic, more relaxed, quiet, more fun to ride road that kind of takes you through some smaller towns and shows you a little more of the characteristic of the place that you're traveling through. So when I'm trying to get from one city to another, or just from point A to point B, instead of just jumping on the freeway, what I'll look for is whatever that highway is going across the state I'm traveling through, somewhere parallel to that is going to be an old 2-lane highway that used to be that main route before it was replaced with the super freeway 6-lane, you know, tractor trailers everywhere, super highway that there is now. There's a 2-lane highway somewhere parallel to that highway that will get you from point A to point B just the same, but it'll be a lot more relaxing, a lot more beautiful, and you'll find a lot of cool little small towns and little country stores and restaurants and things that you wouldn't find on the highway. You'd be more likely to find, you know, a McDonald's or a Burger King. But you get on these 2-laners and you find a lot more local flair. Now this next tip might actually be kind of obvious, but I think it's worth mentioning, and that is look for scenic bypasses and scenic routes. They're usually labeled on the street signs and usually on maps too. You'll get alternate routes to these 2-lane highways that are specifically declared scenic, and they're usually pretty amazing. Avenue of the Giants, for example, is one of my favorite roads in this country. Happens to be a scenic bypass of Highway 101. Natchez Trace, another awesome motorcycle road, that's a scenic route. These are all over the United States, and they are just great roads for motorcycles, so definitely keep an eye out for those. They're actually usually worth going out of your way to see. Another thing you can look for is any road that skirts a mountain or follows a river or any kind of water, like I mentioned before. Usually if you're looking at a map that has any kind of topography on it, you can see that there's a mountain range and there's a road snaking along the side of it or through it or over it. These are usually going to be great roads. Look for the twisties, and it's usually going to be scenic and fun to ride. And another tip is using national parks as part of your route. So yeah, they're a great destination, but also a lot of times you can use the main route going right through that national park to get you from point A to point B. And maybe this isn't, you know, the highlight part of your trip, like you've already seen this national park, but it's still a great way to get from here to there. And so this is a trick that I actually use a lot. Yellowstone, for example, when I was heading north to go to Glacier, it just made perfect sense for me to ride through Yellowstone. Why not? I'm going that way. I know it's going to be beautiful. It's a fun road. Traffic's a little more intense, but it's so beautiful that it's definitely worth it. So if you can fit that in as part of your route to just kind of cut through some national parks, it's definitely worth it. All right, so my next tip is actually more of something that you should be avoiding than something you should be seeking out. This is actually avoid big cities. Now, if you're on a trip that lasts, you know, more than 1 week, it's so easy to lose track of what day it is and just forget that real life is going on all around you in these places you're traveling in. So I was actually on a trip a few years ago, and I woke up in the morning, I was all ready for a great day. We were gonna ride through Memphis and get to Little Rock by the end of the day, and we woke up, we hit the road real early, probably about 7 a.m. and we were pulling into Memphis, and I have never seen traffic so bad. It was completely stopped, my bike overheated, it was gridlock everywhere, it was such a nightmare. And all of that could have been avoided if we had woken up in the morning and realized, oh, it's a Tuesday at 7 o'clock and we're heading into a major city. We could have missed all that rush hour if we had just waited a couple hours and just kind of kept that in mind that, you know, major cities have a lot of traffic during the week. So just be aware of that. If you are going to a city, be careful with your timing on that. So here's my last tip. Look for ferry crossings. Now, I try to do this as much as possible because it gets me off the bike for a minute. I get to do something a little different, hang out on a boat and see, you know, just see the world from a different perspective, you know, look back at the land from the water. It's always a fun experience. And so I try to mix these into my motorcycle trips as much as possible. Like, for example, the ferry from Olympic Peninsula to Seattle, or I took a ferry one time in Vermont going across a river that was beautiful, or, you know, getting from Connecticut to Long Island, New York on a ferry is a great boat ride. Just really beautiful and just kind of changes things up a little bit. So it's nice to throw a few ferry crossings into your motorcycle trip. So in my office, I actually have a bookshelf that has a bunch of, you know, motorcycle route planning books and things like that. A few of them that I would highly recommend, though, if you're just looking for some inspiration or some really great motorcycle routes, is Adventure Motorcycle Routes. Now this one is more if you're traveling around the world. There's a few things in the United States in that book, and a lot of it is more geared towards off-road riding. But it's a super awesome book, and just the pictures are great, and it's really exciting stuff to look at. So this one's great for inspiration, and you can use the routes too, obviously. The other three books that I use a lot as inspiration and also for information is National Geographic's The World's Most Scenic Drives. And this is routes all over the world. They're absolutely beautiful. The pictures are incredible, great for inspiration, and I've worked a few of these into quite a few of my motorcycle trips. The other two are National Geographic's National Parks book and also their Scenic Highways and Byways. Both of those are specific to the United States. I've used them a lot to find routes and destinations for motorcycle trips. So these four books are really great. I'll link to them below if you want to check them out. So that's it. Those are my tips on route planning and finding destinations for motorcycle trips. Hope you guys got something out of this video. If you did, make sure you hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you guys want to see more of my videos about motorcycles, traveling, adventure, camping, route planning, things like this. Alright guys, question of the day. What is your favorite motorcycle destination? I would have to say mine is probably Dragon's Tail in Tennessee and North Carolina, but I'd love to hear from you guys, so let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you guys soon.